A couple of weeks ago, I stumbled upon this video by Sabine Ossenfelder. In it, she explained her frustrations with academia.
When I signed up for studying at the university, I thought being a physicist was my dream job. But here I am on YouTube. How did that happen? I think I owe you an explanation. It made me realize that this institute wasn't about knowledge discovery. It was about money making. But I knew it was bullshit, just as most of the work in that area is currently bullshit, and just as most of academic research that your taxes pay for is almost certainly bullshit.
I think her rant on academia is valid, and I'm gonna be honest with you, this video is going to be a bit more personal, a bit more ranty than usual, but I felt like I need it. Like Sabine, I imagined academic research as the place where people embrace their pathological obsession for niche topics and their desire to get closer to scientific truth. I didn't know anyone working in academia before I did my research master's degree. I was the first one in my family to get a uni degree, so my perception of what academic research was very naive in a way, just like Sabine. I grew up in the countryside where things are approached in very pragmatic ways. And I'm not saying this as if it was the best way to approach things, but it was interesting to come into academia with that culture and experience. In fact, where I come from, social sciences are seen as not really valuable. We were encouraged by our parents and teachers to go into law, business, medicine, or engineering, so things that are very pragmatic. I too thought for a long time that social sciences weren't as important as real sciences, and that's why I specialized in biology, maths, and physics in high school, and was then encouraged to go into engineering before deciding to choose law and then switching to Anglophone literature and histories, followed by a master's degree in US history, which then led me to create this channel. All of that to say that I came into academia with a specific culture and background, but also with a desire to be challenged. Academia challenged the beliefs I had regarding social sciences. It showed me that in order to have a functioning society, you need engineers and doctors, but also philosophers and sociologists. AI is a good example of this. You need an engineer to improve the technology, but you also need a philosophical video essay on it to talk about its ethics. My studies also made me realize that solving a philosophical dilemma or writing a thesis is just as technical as solving a math equation. And from then on, it became a passion of mine to share that knowledge with as many people as possible, especially those who don't have access to or are still skeptical of the necessity of social sciences. Now, I quickly understood that I probably wouldn't be able to do that in academia. As master's students, we were simultaneously encouraged to do a PhD because it would be the culmination of our studies and a great intellectual achievement. But we were also discouraged to do so because it was financially and psychologically costly, and it didn't necessarily lead to any job. Those who could afford to do a PhD were usually the most privileged students. The least privileged often gave up academia after getting their BA, and some still managed to do a master's thanks to scholarships and part-time work, like it was the case for me. My heart told me to pursue a PhD, but I don't think it would have been a good financial decision, so I chose not to, and here I am on YouTube. It frustrated me that the answer to the many problems I had with academia was to start my own channel, so my own business. I'm lucky that it was successful for me, but I know many other people who have tried, who are struggling and may give up or go back to a normal job or choose different studies.
I think for young people, it's kind of getting more and more untenable in terms of just sort of surviving. I mean, financially, I don't know, it's kind of getting horrendous. It's kind of a bit of a joke, really. You know, we're paying so much money as tax. I live alone. I pay $1,200 in rent on my own. I have a full-time job and a part-time job to survive. I've got 2 degrees.
Going back to Sabine's video, so Sabine also left academia, but for different reasons. In her video, she explains how academia increasingly relies on grants to pay PhD students and researchers. According to her, what matters is not innovation, but pleasing your peers with the right language, the right topics that will get you and your colleagues the big grants. Now, it would be tempting to criticize scholars, their increasing individualism and obsession with grants, but doing so would be a bit reductive. All the problems I have talked about are inherent to the fact that academia is turning into a big corporation. The ideal is no longer to experiment in search for truth, to share knowledge with as many people as possible. No, the ideal is to bring as much money into the university as possible. And that means taking a lot of money from students, and it also means selling out for big corporations, and it also means paying researchers as little as possible to the point where no one wants to pursue this career anymore. I mean, yeah, academia sucks right now, and all of us, no matter our level of education, no matter our social class, should be very concerned about it. So in this video, we're going to look at the implications of the downfall of academia and what we can do about it. Let's go.
Today I'm going to tell you a story, which is basically the story of why I chose to leave academia.
Your master's feels like you're being hit by a bullet train, whereas your PhD feels like you're being run over by an extremely heavy, long, slow steam engine.
So I have withdrawn from my PhD program.
Men don't go to university anymore. Like really, in several industrialized countries, more and more women go to university, but less and less men do. The influencers and thinkers of the manosphere see this as proof that, women will soon be more powerful than men. This is it, men are now the ones suffering from gender inequality. But we can read that phenomenon in a different way, one that actually makes sense. Men don't go to university anymore because it's really expensive and that money can be made without having a degree.
Plumbers, they make so much money because we don't have enough plumbers.
Why do women stay in college then? Because we're dumb. The manosphere was right. No, we're not dumb. But let me try to explain what's happening here. If we look back on the past decades, we see that women's inclusion in universities and in the workplace has been a long struggle. For a big chunk of history, women were forbidden or discouraged to go to university because their emancipation was not welcome. Some elite women could go to university because families liked the idea of having cultured daughters who would then marry elite men. As feminist ideas spread in society, it became more and more acceptable for women to have a life outside the home, so to free themselves from domesticity. In our capitalist societies, that freedom was to be found in the workplace. Being able to work meant being financially independent, which meant being independent from the dad, the husband, the boyfriend, and that's great. Why is it great? Well, imagine the guy is physically or psychologically abusive, or just think that feminism will lead to the collapse of society, a pretty obvious dramatization of the fact that he cannot do the laundry without the help of mummy. Well, feminists encourage women to leave the kitchen, take the pill, and go get those degrees. And it's been pretty effective. Me and my girlfriends from school were pretty sure that we were going to go to college, even though our parents didn't. It felt quite natural to us. That's one of the reasons why, despite student debt, despite the average pay at the end of the studies, women still go to university. Wait a sec, let me nuance that a little bit. In fact, more and more women come to the realization that yes, work guarantees your independence from boyfriend, husband, dad, but it doesn't necessarily make you free. Don't get me wrong, a certain class of women has benefited from their better inclusion in the workplace. I'm talking about the girl bosses. But other classes of women don't feel free working under capitalism. When I was researching for my book, I did find some of these frustrated women in the comment section of, wait for it, tradwife content. Yes, tradwife content has become a space for women to complain about work and to romanticize a more quiet, peaceful life. I mean, when you think about it, tradwives have time to cook, to go in nature, to find new hobbies, while you are trapped in an office with at least $50,000 of debt, shitty managers, no time for hobbies, and constant air pollution. What trad content does is that it sells a nostalgic ideal, the joyful life of the 1950s America, or what historian Stephanie Cantz described as the way we never were. Now, women who share their unhappiness living under capitalism in the comment section of tradwife content won't turn into tradwives overnight. But still, it's revealing of a growing frustration, an understanding that in this economy, getting a degree won't necessarily lead to liberation. So men and women are frustrated, depressed, and it makes sense. Fulfilling our basic needs is becoming more and more difficult, and so yeah, we have to think twice before going to college. As a response to that, you see online a growing industry of get-rich-fast influencers targeting the men who can't afford college but still believe in upward mobility and don't want to live like their parents. Women, on the other side, are still encouraged to get a degree because is the best way to guarantee their independence, but not their freedom. As a society, having less and less people interested in getting a degree is really problematic. Liberal democracies usually pride themselves for having the most qualified workforce in the world. The more educated a country is, the richer it gets. I don't think it hurts to remind ourselves that when we go get that higher education, a bachelor, master's or PhD, when we invest money in that, we do it for our career, that's for sure, but we also do it for our country. Our country benefits from having a highly qualified workforce. That's why some countries make sure that education is free or even pay their students to go to school, because they know it's a great investment for the economy. They know it's going to give them a good image on the global scene. It's like a form of soft power. When we take that into account, it becomes really hard to look at what countries like the US, the UK or France is doing and not think, this is completely absurd. What I mean by that is the complicity of liberal and conservative governments in facilitating the privatization of higher education is deeply concerning and completely at odds with their nationalist interests. These people are so obsessed with capitalism that they are willing to sacrifice the sustainability of a highly qualified workforce. They let capitalism destroy academia and then come up with things like this.
You should go to college if you want to write rounds for your head with knowledge. If you want to stare at grass, don't go to college. But for everything else, you should go to college.
Yes, people should go to college. It's an enriching experience. But they can't afford it because of... When people say that capitalism breeds innovation, what they refer to is the profit incentive. The idea is that people innovate because they want to further their career and make a lot of money. Now, this is not wrong, but it's kind of absurd to assume that innovation can only happen with the profit incentive. In fact, I'm going to argue the contrary, that capitalism prevents innovation more than it enables it. In the previous section, we explained that capitalism makes higher education less accessible and therefore less attractive. One of the consequences of that is that the amount of people who can reach a level where they can innovate is limited. Now, obviously, you don't need a college degree in order to innovate. People create new systems, new ideas every day, no matter their level of education, but I'm going to precise that I'm talking about scientific research. Well, scientific research innovation requires a level of expertise that can hardly be achieved without a master's degree, without a PhD. But getting to that level requires a lot of sacrifices and a lot of privilege. Now, let me tell you the story of someone who didn't have those privileges. Picture this: Mohamed Anis, 24-year-old, living in a low-income area in Paris. Parents immigrated from Algeria. I read about him in Sois jeune et tais-toi by journalist Salomé Saki. So Mohamed Anis chose vocational training in energy systems installation before managing to get into a history degree in Paris-Sorbonne and follow his true passion in a prestigious institution. He would spend 2 hours in public transports every day to get to university and also had a part-time job. He still lives with his parents, but his dad struggles to provide for his family. He doesn't earn enough money, and his mother has a disability that prevents her from working. He told journalist Salomé Saki that after classes, while others would study or get drinks, I would put on my work uniform to help my parents. He managed to do this for 2 years. He was willing to work super hard in order to follow his true passion, history. But after 2 years, the burnout became too intense. Mohamed Anis had to give up. It was too much and his family needed some extra money. He said, quote, "I grew up in a poor neighborhood. Some people are in a way shittier situation than mine. I'm aware of this. You don't get to choose where you were born, that's it. What bothers me though is when people talk about meritocracy. When I was young, I was lucky to have access to a public library, to have access to those infrastructures. Really, I appreciate that. But let's be serious. People like me can't do what they want in life." Mohamed Anis' story is really sad, but all too common. I mean, think about all the Mohamed Anis who couldn't survive higher education. Think about all the potential talents, innovators that were left behind because of financial, social barriers in our society. Think about how advanced our society would be if we gave everyone the same opportunities to learn, to gain expertise, to innovate. That doesn't mean that everyone has to go to uni and that everyone who's going to uni is going to innovate, but still, I much prefer a system where we give a chance to everyone and see what comes out of it, rather than a system where we put barriers first and then select and give grants to the few who made it till the end of their studies. Right now, the working class don't even get a chance. This is how unfair the system is. This is class struggle at its finest. You see, you can do everything the elites want you to do. work hard, make sacrifices like Mohammed Anis did. They want meritocracy, we'll give it to them. But it's still not enough. I deeply feel for Mohammed Anis. I totally understand those who don't even want to play the meritocracy game because we're very likely to end up in the same place in the end. I'm very lucky that my channel is doing well, but now that I'm on the other side, that I get access to the places I didn't get access to in the past, I see a lot of class contempt. I see a clear lack of awareness of how restricted those spaces are. I see that nobody does class solidarity like the rich, and it makes me angry. It really does. You know, we'll often talk about the stories of those who made it, those who, like me, achieved upward mobility and are now welcome in bourgeois spaces, but we rarely talk about how difficult it is to exist in those bourgeois spaces, especially when you feel like you don't belong. It's depressing to see how they instrumentalize you to feel better about themselves. As French writer Edouard Louis said, they see you as a flower emerging from a pile of shit, and they take you, they show you around, they talk about your story, how retarded working class people are, and how welcoming and progressive they, the bourgeois, are. Anyway, rant is over. One of the greatest inhibitors of innovation is the preservation of intellectual property. Under capitalism, intellectual property in the form of patents is gatekept by corporations to prevent competitors from building upon or developing the technology. So intellectual property becomes an obstacle to progress because it limits the circulation of information. Now, don't get me wrong, I do believe that intellectual property is important, especially in the context of established companies or individuals stealing ideas from smaller creators or underprivileged groups. That happens a lot and it's unfair. But in a world that increasingly commodifies knowledge, art, creation, intellectual property claims has become the new secret tool to counter obstacles to one's career growth at the expense of progress. You sometimes see that on YouTube when relationships between creators get tense because they can talk about the same topics, they have similar ideas, and so one might feel like the other one is plagiarizing. And again, that happens, especially on social media. But I feel like that tension is often the result of a fear of competition, a desire to have a monopoly over a certain topic or idea. The pharmaceutical industry is known for doing that. They slightly change existing drugs that are about to go generic to make sure that they can sort of renew the patent and avoid competition. They invest a ton of money into research and development to ensure that they maintain their monopoly over a specific drug, instead of truly innovating. That brings me to my last point. What do we mean by innovation? That's the title of the last part. In 2022, a group of graduating engineers from Paris Agritech, a prestigious university whose motto is, quote, "Talents for Sustainable Future," stepped on stage and instead of giving the usual, "Thank you to Paris Agritech for giving us the opportunity to build a better future, blah, blah, blah," they did this. So the graduates of class 2022 are reunited today for the last time after 3 or 4 years at AgroParisTech. Many of us do not want to pretend to be proud and deserving of obtaining a diploma at the end of an education which pushes us to participate in the ongoing social and ecological destruction. We don't see ourselves as the talents of a sustainable planet. We don't see ecological and social destruction as issues or challenges to which we must find solutions as engineers. We see that agribusiness is waging a war against the living world and farmers everywhere on Earth. We do not see science and technology as neutral and apolitical. We believe that technological innovation or startups will save nothing but capitalism. AgroParisTech educates hundreds of students every year to work for the industry in different ways. Tamper with plants in labs for international companies that increasingly enslave farmers, design processed meals and then chemotherapy to treat those who got ill from them, invent good conscience labels to allow the professional managerial class to feel heroic because they eat better than others, develop green energies, allowing the acceleration of digitalization of society while polluting and exploiting on the other side of the world, produce reports on CSR, social and environmental responsibility, that are as long and preposterous as the crimes they conceal are scandalous, or count the frogs and butterflies so that those who pour concrete can make them disappear legally. Capitalism breeds innovation. The more I say it, the more it sounds like something created to facilitate denial. Academia sucks because capitalism sucks. Academia has been fully integrated into capitalism. I mean, the number of collaborations between private corporations and universities is consistently increasing. And no, it doesn't allow for more research to be done. It rather limits it by selecting what is going to bring the most money. And sorry to say this, but what brings a lot of money usually go against the interest of the planet, of the people living on the planet and working on it. What are my sources for this? Well, 2 centuries of capitalism, baby. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, the conversation continues in the comments section. Don't forget to like, to subscribe if it's not already done. A big thank you to my patrons for their support, and a special thank to top tier patrons. Finally, I need to talk to you about today's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform to grow your presence online. They give you a bunch of tools to create your ideal websites. So this is mine so far, Alice Capelle. I use it as a platform to kind of show all the work that I do on YouTube, my contributions, but also my book. I also added all my social media accounts. You also have analytical tools. You can run effective email campaigns. On their website, you can also get advice from professionals on how to build your website, etc. So many things you can do. So if you're interested in it, if you want to try it out, then go to squarespace.com to get a free trial. And once you're ready to go public, then you can go to squarespace.com/AliceCapelle to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you, Squarespace, for sponsoring the video, and yeah, I'll see you very soon. Salut!